Hi, this is Elizabeth, one of the co-hosts of Beauties and Headcanons. Thanks for listening to the following broadcast on Public House Media.
This is Rachel Mullins, host of #NoFilterFriday here on Public House Media. Thanks for listening to the following broadcast on Public House Media. Once you're done with this episode, I hope you'll come check out my new show, #NoFilterFriday, where we talk about all of the sexual misconduct allegations swirling around Hollywood. A new show drops every Friday at 8:30 Pacific Standard Time. Don't forget to subscribe on iTunes so you'll never miss an episode of #NoFilterFriday. Thanks again for checking out the following broadcast on Public House Media.
Throughout history, the course of sports has been shaped by one thing: the fans.
From the moments you never dreamed of,
Bobby Womack has saved the USA's life in this World Cup! Hall, the runner! Loose ball! It's good! Gonzaga! The flipper still fits!
To the moments that still give you nightmares.
Behind the bag! It gets through Buckner! Here comes Knight and the Mets win it! He's in! Patriots win the Super Bowl! Brady has his fifth!
through the good and the bad, fans have helped change the games we watch and the players we love.
They may not be the most logical people.
You are a factory of sadness! I'll see you Sunday.
But they know their teams better than anybody.
They'll blow in the ninth.
You may not always see them, but you know where to find them.
After all, there's nothing quite like the view from the cheap seats.
Broadcasting as part of the Public House Media Network.
Grab a chair and enjoy all there is in
The cheap seats.
And a happy Friday morning to you, Matt Coyne alongside Jake Holmes. Jake, how you doing this morning?
Oh man, I couldn't be better to be back with my full-time co-host.
Yes.
Welcome back, Matt.
Hey, thank you. Yeah, it's great to be back. It was great to listen to you and Christian last week. Sound like you guys had a great show. I'll be honest, I was a little jealous, but I mean, I understand. I guess things have to happen. The world has to keep on turning, but I am very excited to be back. I think we have a good show for you this morning after my week off. So before we get started, though, as always, I want to remind you that we are presented by Public House Media. You can listen to us on iTunes, Spreaker, iHeartRadio, pretty much, again, as always, anywhere where you can get your podcast. You can visit us at thephmedia.com. Where you can find out more about the cheap seats as well as the other shows that is made possible by Public House Media. Like us on the Cheap Seats Facebook page, like Public House Media on Facebook page, and make sure you join us on Mondays with Christian and Jonathan, Wednesdays with Keith and Max, and then Fridays again with Jake and myself. Jake, so there's some big stuff going on in the NBA, I guess. This morning with our we wanted to touch with obviously Sunday being the start of free agency in the NBA. We're going to touch more on the NHL here later in the show because obviously we can't get through a show without talking about the NHL. So, but seriously, there's a big weekend coming up for both sports. And there's a player in the NBA by the name of, I think his name's like Lebron Lames or something like that, Jake, that people are waiting to see where he goes. A lot of people think he's going to pick today. Jake, what do you think? Do you think he's going to wait till Sunday? You think he's going to come out today? You think he's going to stay in Cleveland? What do you think he's going to do?
Watching LeBron for the last 15 years, almost that he's probably going to milk this for all it's worth. He's going to take his time, of course. And I'm not saying anything bad about him. I mean, he think at a younger age it was kind of a little bit egocentric in my opinion. But now I think he really, his wife, his two kids, they're also very important in the decision. LeBron loves Cleveland. His kids go to school in L.A. I mean, he hasn't. I mean, of course, he had until today to pick up that player option. Depending on what he does later on this afternoon, I mean, we don't really know if he, even if he declines that player option, does he restructure his contract to staying? Does he, take another contract to stay in Cleveland? I don't know how much sense that would make. Not with a guaranteed $35 million this year, but yeah, it's going to be very interesting to see who wins the LeBron James sweepstakes. But one thing that also, two guys that are kind of connected is he and Paul George, who yesterday declined his player option for his final year in Oklahoma City. So Paul George is going to be on the move. Do they team up and they make a super team in L.A. who have a crap ton of cap space? Can L.A. find a way to bring in Kawhi Leonard? Yeah. I'm telling you, if that happens, Golden State's going to be in a little bit of trouble, I think. So we'll have to see. It's gonna be fun to watch, that's for sure. But I mean, after Paul George, I mean, you have some other free agents. Chris Paul's unrestricted, but I mean, Houston's going to do everything in their power to keep them. But a couple other trades. DeAndre Jordan's been mentioned in some trade talk, but he's got a player option as well for this next year. It's going to be fun. It's going to be wild. And NBA gets things done really quick. So I mean, probably the first 10 days of their free agency period. I mean, LeBron, I think, made his first, quote, decision, that big, ridiculous TV show on July 10th, I believe that was July 10th, and that was long. That was long awaited, so we'll see.
Yeah, it's funny because the side of where I'm like, realistic side, I really see LeBron staying in Cleveland. I think you're right. I think he's just... It's going to be a lot to take him away. We were talking a few weeks back that, the city of Cleveland needs LeBron. Let's just be honest. They need LeBron. I think they're going to do what it takes. Obviously, him being a hometown boy, I think that's going to help. But then my other side, I'm like, no, I want to see him go somewhere. Just the drama of it. Do I want to really see him go to LA? We've talked about this. Do we really want to see him in the West? But like you said, if they can get, there's been sources saying that the Lakers and Spurs both are going after Leonard, and obviously, like you said, with George saying that he's not going to opt in. It seems like the stars could be aligning for something like that to happen, which I just think would be very. I know most NBA fans are like, Matt, shut up. That's not going to be entertaining to watch. But I like drama, I guess. And
well, it's the nature of the NBA now. Mm-hmm. I mean, really. I mean, guys are leaving teams to go win, and with the max salary, there's a soft salary cap. So I mean, teams can do this in the NBA now, and it's the NBA's fault. Yeah. So I mean, if you like it, you like it. If you don't, you don't. I don't like it. I'm a Bulls fan. We stink every year. We don't get these big players. It's like, so we haven't been good since 98, but 2010, I should say. But anyways, but yeah, it's the nature of the NBA now. So I mean, if that happens, this is eerily similar to what happened with the Miami Heat back in 2010. You have three really big players that are potentially, you hear rumors that they're going to join forces together, and it just so happens to be in Los Angeles this time. The only difference is Dwayne Wade stayed in Miami. All three of them didn't go. Chris Bosh and LeBron went to Miami. But I mean, it's interesting. It is eerily similar, just 8 years later.
Yeah, I was talking to somebody the other day, Jake, saying, would you imagine if this was happening during the Michael Jordan era, that every 3 years Michael Jordan, it was, where's he go? Now, obviously social media didn't exist, and you didn't have the outlets that you had to get up to the second, information for the most part. But it just, like you said, it's the nature of the NBA now. This is what they do. I mean, this is every few years, LeBron, it's, where's LeBron going? Where's LeBron going? And like you said, I'm not a huge fan. I do agree, but when it happens, I say that I'm like, I'm not a huge fan, and then when it happens, I'm like, oh, where's he gonna go? It's like, and then it's just so funny because I get sucked into it. I'm like, darn you! I try so hard not to, and then I end up getting sucked in. So we'll see where he goes. Like you said, he'll probably milk this out for, even though he said he doesn't want a circus. I don't know if I necessarily believe that, but maybe in his older age, he's it seems like he's really weighing his options, seeing what's best for him and his family, and we'll see where he ends up. So it's always, it's been interesting. Like you said, his big ordeal he had a few years ago, and then that thing they did in Miami when they had like the introduction and the
oh my gosh, it was pathetic.
All on stage. Yeah. You remember like the fire was like coming out and they're like, LeBron? I was like, you got to be kidding me. This is happening right now. But
hey Matt, I heard a funny joke about that the other day because they were talking about it too. It was like, how many fireworks there were in that event?
What?
Not one, not two, not three, not four. You remember what he said when he was talking about championships?
Oh yeah. That's right.
That whole thing. Yeah. That whole thing was so ridiculous. But I mean, LeBron was what, 26? I mean, he was still, he wasn't a kid, but he was still a young player, and he still had that whole mantra around him, about pretty much being, almost, a basketball, some kind of basketball deity or whatever. I mean, so he still had that. He still had that around him. He was still, kind of, a cocky-ish player. But that's not the case anymore. I mean, LeBron's grown up. He's a good family man, and I think that they're going to have a lot to do with this decision.
Yeah. So it always excites me whenever I see players who, kind of settle down and realize it's so much more than the sport itself. So, we will see where he ends up going, along with a bunch of other high profile. I mean, obviously he's the highest profile, but like Jake and myself are saying, are the stars aligning for a super team to come to LA, or most likely LA, let's be honest. But anyways, we'll see what happens here with free agency starting on Sunday. Stay with Jake and myself. When we come back, we're going to just jump right into NHL free agency. Jake is chomping at the bit here to talk more about NHL free agency. There's been already a bunch of trades, a bunch of rumors, a bunch of hype going on with this. So stay with Jake and myself here in the cheap seats when we come back. And welcome back to the Cheap Seats. Jake Holmes, Matt Corey, and we are going to go into one of our favorite topics. Well, I think, Jake, this is your favorite topic, is NHL free agency. Jake, I remember, we were just talking about, what it would be like with Michael Jordan. Free agency in all four of the big sports was never this big. I feel like it's just as big as the season itself nowadays.
You're absolutely right. I mean, and that's what's cool about this time of year with the NBA and the NHL is because there's never a dull moment. I mean, like we were talking, last week or the week before, I can't remember. Literally, the most boring part of the NHL and NBA season is the preseason when they're playing hockey, when you're starting to see how rosters are going to develop. It's really interesting, and right now I'm telling you, these last 2 weeks, probably, or the last week, like NHL draft into NHL free agency, and same deal with the NBA. It's one of the most exciting times of the year. I mean, it's right up there with the last couple weeks of the regular season as far as excitement's concerned, because you have these fringe playoff teams that have the ability to move up and become a real contender.
Yeah. Yeah, so let's talk about it. get right into it. Obviously, there's already been some movement going on. One of the top free agents has already re-signed with, and obviously John Carlson has already re-signed with Washington for 8 years, $64 million. Kind of going down the list, we're waiting to see, where everybody else is going. Jake, have you heard any rumors or any place? Obviously, none of them can officially sign yet, but have you heard of any the big name free agents agreeing, to going anywhere?
Well, of course, John Tavares has 5 teams, big center for the New York Islanders. He's got 5 teams. I believe yesterday he met with the final 2, and I believe that it was I think that it was Tampa Bay and Dallas. But he's got 5 teams that he's looking at, of course, the New York Islanders, Toronto Maple Leafs, San Jose Sharks, Dallas Stars, Boston Bruins. Sorry, there's a 6th team that came in as well in the Tampa Bay Lightning. So those 6, one of those 6 are going to win the John Tavares sweepstakes. And I'll tell you, any of those teams could use him, but I think that Tampa Bay could use their what they have elsewhere. They need some help on the blue line. Toby Enstrom isn't going to be re-signed in Winnipeg. That could be a guy that could help them. And he's a veteran defenseman. The going price for them right now is anywhere from $3 to $6 million. Tampa Bay, I don't think, has it. But, 1 or 2 moves off the table. They didn't re-sign Chris Kunitz, so they have $1 million of space there. 1 or 2 moves to get some money off the table, that could certainly happen. But the one that's really set, the free agent signing that's really set in stone, is former Columbus Blue Jacket defenseman going to the Pittsburgh Penguins, in Jack Johnson. So Jack Johnson and Sidney Crosby have been friends since high school, and this isn't the first time that the Penguins and Jack Johnson have tried to come together on something. Even the Penguins and Blue Jackets were talking about a trade a couple years ago for the defenseman.
Yeah, I remember that, yeah.
So the thing is he's left-handed. The Penguins can use that. The Penguins also need some depth on the blue lines. Get any, if you want to win a Stanley Cup final, you're not going to be able to just have 6 defensemen you can rely on. They needed a 7th, and really by the time that trade deadline and everything comes next year as the season progresses, they're probably going to have an 8th, whether it be like Zach Trotman or someone coming up from Frank Corrado coming up from Wilkes-Barre that can help them as the 8. So, yeah, Jack Johnson, say what you want about the contract. I don't know what you think about it, but I think that's something we're going to have to see on.
Yeah, I've always been a Jack Johnson fan. I love his music. Oh, wait, wrong guy. But no, seriously, that was so lame. Wow.
Banana pancakes.
We just lost half of the people listening. No, but I've always been a Jack Johnson fan. Yeah, I was surprised by the deal, but I was surprised too, Jake. I'll be honest. I went and looked at his stats. I thought he. I always thought, now defenseman, you can't always go by goals and assists, obviously, but I always thought he was a much more productive player. Is he one of those defensemen that, he doesn't show it on the score sheet? Is that just the type of player he is?
Well, he's an offensive guy. He's certainly an offensive guy, and really over the last couple of years, his production has gone down. Mm-hmm. But the thing is as that team has evolved, under John Tortorella, that's kind of been when John Tortorella was hired as head coach of the Columbus Blue Jackets. That's when he kind of started falling off. So, maybe he is a guy that needs, to produce more on the score sheet. But yeah, there's a lot of defensemen on that team that are kind of shadowing over Jack Johnson. That's a really good unit in Columbus, and really he just fell off. Fell out of the light. So really 3 goals, 8 assists, 11 points last year. It was only a -8, but he was healthy. He was a healthy scratch in a few games. So as far as Jack Johnson's concerned, I think maybe a fresh start will help him out, especially if he's playing with one of his childhood friends, Sidney Crosby.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so kind of going on, to other free agents. Sorry, I can't talk either. Both of us are out of it. So John Tavares, we touched on him. John Carlson has already been signed. Are there some other higher profile, if you will, players, Jake, that you're keeping an eye on that you could see moving? I know, James Van Wow, I really can't talk. James Van Riemsdyk is still available. Paul Stanzi, James Neal, Mike Green, David Perron. Do you see any teams taking heavy advantage of the free agency? I know we've talked about the Golden Knights have a lot of cap space to mess around with here during free agency.
And I'll tell you honestly, I'm very surprised that Vegas didn't go after John Tavares. I'm very surprised that they didn't. They have the money to do it. Why not? But it is what it is. As far as like James Neal, Jason Garrison, David Perron, I think Vegas keeps all of them guys. I don't think that they really can. But one guy that I do look at is Jumbo Joe Thornton. Now, Joe Thornton, he's up there, 38 years old. He's pushing 40. He's an expensive player. But here's the thing. He's played so many years in San Jose now. I think San Jose wants to keep him and bring in John Tavares. They have the money to do it. Joe Thornton is one guy that I look at. Plus, the thing is, if he was to leave San Jose, teams are always looking for guys like that. A good dressing room guy, a guy that you want to win a championship for. And Joe Thornton, he still can play. He's one of the best passers of all time. That ability doesn't leave with age. So your speed does, your goal scoring can, but your passing ability, your hockey smarts don't leave you. Joe Thornton can certainly help somebody, help a team. Rick Nash, another, older player, older veteran. Rick Nash, Boston's not going to bring him back, and rightfully so. That didn't really work too well.
Yeah.
But a team like the New York Rangers, possibly bringing him back, a team that's looking towards the future, but they're still a fringe playoff team that they can maybe steal a playoff spot with a guy like Rick Nash. That's one. But yeah, I mean, this isn't, especially on defense, this isn't a great year for free agency. I mean, the two best are Toby Enstrom, really, and Mike Green. Neither one of them are really, world beaters. But Paul Stastny, a center there for, he got traded to the Winnipeg Jets. He would be the third of the big three free agents other than John Tavares. Paul Stastny, I think Winnipeg should keep him around, but, we'll see. I haven't heard anything from the Stastny front.
Okay. All right, well, so again, as well as the NBA free agency, we'll see what's going on with NHL. Jake, this question has nothing to do with free agency at all. It has to do with I want to get your feedback. This happened right around from the last time we met, and you're probably like, what is he going to ask? Were you okay? So I wasn't really upset that the Washington Capitals won the Stanley Cup. I didn't even get bothered when I saw Alex Ovechkin in literally every place he took that Stanley Cup. I wasn't upset with that. What I got upset about is when I found out Barry Trotz stepped down as the head coach. I don't know about you, but I was just like, are you kidding me, dude? After all these issues, and then you finally got what you want, and you stepped down. Am I wrong in thinking that, or did you have an issue with that, or do you know something I didn't know, or I don't know, or just a side question I keep forgetting to ask you?
Sure, yeah. And I mean, with Barry Trotz is that he was. This was the last year of his contract.
Yes.
This was the last year of his contract, but he had a 2-year extension if they won the Stanley Cup. They just couldn't come to terms. I mean, okay. They just couldn't come to terms, and I don't know how I feel because I don't know the number that was offered. I think that it was in the $4 million range per. And it was less than $4 million because that's what he took with the Islanders. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I'm not really quite sure how I felt about that. What I was more upset about was teams that were looking to get him. Barry Trotz is a fine coach. Don't get me wrong. He's a great coach and he's a great person too. But the only team that needed a coach was the New York Islanders, and you had teams that were. You had the Edmonton Oilers with Todd McClellan on their bench. That team that management does absolutely nothing to improve the quality on ice, not behind the bench. They do nothing to, make that team better around Connor McDavid. Why are you looking to fire Todd McClellan when you haven't even given him a chance?
Yeah.
So that's one example that really fired me up. So Barry Trotz, Barry Trotz going to the New York Islanders, I think is a great fit. Plus, he gets to play his former team 4 times a year.
Yeah,
but I as far as like him leaving didn't make me upset. What made me more upset was that teams were trying to get him, who already had really good coaches like the Edmonton Oilers with Todd McClellan.
Yeah, yeah. So, well, you helped me out there a little bit. I was just, when I saw that, I was like, really, dude, you got to be. But that makes sense, obviously, with the money situation. And I was reading about that, but I'm like, I'm surprised he couldn't come to terms after finally.
I'm very surprised, too.
Yeah, after getting over that hump, not just the second round hump, and they finally won, So I was just very surprised by that.
Yeah, and the market for head coaches, say their head coach was vacant. They didn't have the ability to go out and grab, Dave Quinn from Boston University. They didn't have that ability.
Yeah.
They had to promote an assistant coach, and it's Todd Reardon who has, a long unsuccessful history, behind the bench. So, as far as coaching. Assistant coaching playoff teams that have had playoff failures. Look at the Penguins. From 2010 to 2015, I believe is when the Capitals hired him. But yeah, and so Todd Reardon's their head coach now, and I just don't think that that's going to work. I don't think that it's a good move.
Yeah, the NHL coaching carousel I've always felt is the weakest at. NFL. You know how that is, Jake. NFL. They fire somebody, and there's like 15 guys waiting in line, ready to go. And then, of course, every year it's Bill Cowher's coming back. But yeah, it's interesting to. I was just very surprised it happened. So, anyways, so obviously, again, Sunday is the first day for free agency for the NHL as well as the NBA. Next week, I'm sure Jake and myself will have a lot to chime in on. I'm sure a lot more will have happened, and we'll see where teams start to fall, who wins the Tavares sweepstakes, and as well as a couple of the other higher profile players. Stay with Jake and myself. We're going to continue. This is like free agent day. So we're going to continue on the free agency train, talk about the worst free agency signings of all time in the 4 major sports. So stay with us here in the cheap seats with Jake and myself. Welcome back to the Cheap Seats. Matt Coyne alongside Jake Holmes, and we're going to talk some World Cup. Joining us right now is Baxter Colburn. Baxter, how are you doing this morning?
Hey, guys. I'm doing well. Thanks for having me back on the show.
Good. Well, you're always welcome. Anytime.
Oh, thank you.
I don't even care if you don't have anything to talk about. We just like to hear your voice, Baxter.
Just going to stop by the studio randomly and just start yelling things. LeBron's going to Boston. I don't know. Just start kind of, who knows.
I like that. That's a great idea. So, anyway, this is your time of the year, Baxter. You're always just buzzing with the World Cup, and so there's a lot of things going on. But the first question I have for you is, I think, something that everybody. I know I'm surprised by. I'm sure you are, but are you surprised by Germany going down already? And why do you think? What do you think led up to that happening?
Yeah, Germany, this is the first time in the history of the World Cup that Germany has not made it to the knockout stages, which, when you think about it, the World Cup's been going on for decades and decades. So to have that type of a record snapped is very surprising for a lot of folks. And I know I'm talking to the wrong 2 hosts, but in theory, like, if the Patriots didn't make the playoffs, people would be a little confused by that, you know, sort of a thing. So that's, to put it into normal American terms, that's kind of what we're looking at right now, with the fact that you had your defending champions now all of a sudden lose 2 of their 3 games. And my thought process, I was talking to this with a friend of mine yesterday because he was asking my thoughts about this as well too. And I said, honestly, Germany played the group stages like they thought they had already won the tournament. There was so much hype going in. They looked like they were, on paper, they looked like they were just going to sweep the tournament. I think they were almost every expert's pick to win the tournament. I believe I had them either in the final or winning the final as a whole. So this sense of entitlement set in, I think, for Germany and ultimately led to their demise, where you see them get beat on the 3 goals that they concede in this World Cup. They are of the 4, I should say. They got beat on counterattacks. Mexico executed 1 perfect counterattack to beat them in the first game, and then South Korea beat them on 2 great counterattacks as well too. Again, so how do you assess this? Some people are saying that there was 1 player that was left off the roster. That's a young starlet for Germany that they say may have made the big difference. I don't necessarily know if I agree with that. Germany's is one of those teams that they have so many talented players that soccer is a weird game. This World Cup is already provided to be a weird World Cup that any team can be beat on any given day now. And that, I think, is going to surprise a lot of people. Nowhere in the history of time has South Korea been able to go toe-to-toe with Germany and then beat them 2-0. So it's not one of those things that happens all the time, but it's good to know, though, that the gap of soccer is starting to close around the world, and it's not just the Hispanic nations. It's not just the high-powered European nations. It's any country can win a game now at the grand stage.
Yes, I definitely, echoing you, I was surprised whenever I saw that. And are there any other teams that have surprised you this year? Teams that you did not think were going to go, do as well as they are?
Well, one team I think that has been surprising has been Croatia. I think there was this hype around them that looked like if they put it together, and I think we start a lot of teams in the NFL, the NBA, with that phrase, if they put it together, they should be a good team. And Croatia, the last couple of World Cups, has not put it together. So far, they've scored 7 goals and only conceded 1, and they won their group with all 9 points. They seem to have put it together so far. Yeah. Does that mean that Croatia is a favorite now moving forward? I don't want to get that far. Did they beat Argentina 3-0? Yes, they did. But at the same time, this is a group that was full of teams like Nigeria and Iceland as well, too. 2 teams that aren't really, in a sense, built for the World Cup stage as far as how they can play. Croatia's got a lot of talented midfielders, and ultimately that's been a big reason for them to have success. When you look at where they're going in the second round, they've got a nice little matchup against Denmark right away. So Croatia could be looking at a nice, deeper run into this World Cup because of how they got drawn, winning their group, and now facing the second team will be Denmark. So I'm interested to see that one. Outside of that, you're always going to have those couple of teams that get through. Am I surprised that Switzerland is out of the group? Am I surprised that Sweden got out of the group? There's always going to be those couple of smaller-ish nations that get out of their groups, whether that be the first or second place teams. Don't read too much into it. Really what you're looking at is, did the little tiny nations like a Peru, like a Panama, things like that are smaller nations, did they get out of the groups? No, they did not. And ultimately, as talented as they may have been, they also realize that the World Cup is very harsh, and they are going to get beat down when they try to go toe-to-toe with the big, big giants. So something to keep in mind from that perspective.
I have one question for you, Baxter. Speaking of Group D, Argentina needed everything to go right on Wednesday, I believe it was Tuesday. They needed everything to go right for them. Now that they're in the knockout phase with Lionel Messi, and how all of that has gone down, what chance do you give them to make a deep run in the knockout phase?
I don't know how many people were annoyed by this, and maybe you were annoyed by this or not, Jake, but the fact that it took until the 3rd game for Messi to remember how to play soccer, I think annoys a lot of soccer fans. And I don't know how deep either of you followed the 2015 Women's World Cup at all, but for the United States, Carly Lloyd, who ended up winning the tournament's Best Player Award, started off the group stages just horrendous. And I remember going on a show saying, I don't know where she is, I don't know what she's doing. And then she ended up scoring a hat trick in the World Cup final. Does that mean that we're going to see a similar trajectory for Messi? I don't know, but you have to be really concerned in all honesty. And this is, if you want the soccer equivalent to what LeBron James does for any NBA team, that's what Messi does for Argentina. Because if you take Messi out of the squad, you take LeBron out of Cleveland, out of any other team, who really do they have left? I would argue Argentina has a couple of better overall players, unlike Cleveland and others do, but it's the same general concept. And when Messi doesn't show up and play at his best, when LeBron doesn't show up and play at his best, they don't win. And that's just kind of the reality of it. And even when LeBron does show up at his best, Cleveland still can't win. But that's a different topic. But either way, though, I think that Argentina is really in a tough spot, and now they have to go toe-to-toe with France, who is young, who is feeling like they can do something really good now moving forward. But I still feel like there's this weird vibe of Maradona flicking off fans, that's going to be circulating around, and all of a sudden they're going to find a way to win that game. Although I would think it would be better overall if France wins it because they've earned it more, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's why I was reading an article the other day about, or just yesterday actually. I'm sorry about Messi and just what was going on with him, and they were paralleling as well to. That team who has somebody who, if they don't play, the team kind of falls apart. So, Baxter, who's your favorite moving forward?
See, it's hard to list the favorite, honestly, because certain teams are showing up more than I think others thought. I like what Portugal has done because of how Ronaldo has played, and if you want to talk about a guy that's answered the call about how good is he, Ronaldo continues to keep answering that call. Spain has been weird for me because they were the team that I was cheering for even before the tournament started. I've said that because people have been like, well, the USA, is that who are you cheering for? And most people default to England because of watching the Premier League. But I say, listen, I go USA first. I'm Italian. I cheer for Italy second. Italy's not in the tournament, and others the USA. I had a lot of Spanish exchange students, a lot of friends in Spain when I was little. So now Spain is my third default team. So I kind of work my way. Then England would be my fourth after that. But still, Spain, I think, has a good opportunity. Mexico worries me, though, too, because you look at the firepower that they do have, and I don't know if they just were confident that they were going to just get through yesterday, or rather on Wednesday when they were playing, because they lost 3-0 to Sweden, and Sweden's not that good. I'm just going to be honest about that, and maybe I've missed something here, but the fact that Mexico lost 3-0, and if one or two other things had gone a different way, in a couple other games, Mexico could have been out of the tournament. So what a way that would have been for them to crash out had they lost 3-0 to Sweden and really looked like they didn't want to even be there in the first place. So that would have been my big thing. Really, though, England's playing at a great level. How well are they actually going to do against normal teams? You beat Panama, you beat Tunisia. Good for you. You're supposed to do that. You're supposed to beat Cleveland Browns. You're supposed to beat the Miami Dolphins. That's what you're supposed to do. How do you play against the bigger teams? How do they play against the Frances, the Spains, the Mexicos, and Brazils? So they have to play. Or they played Belgium to finish off the group as well too. That was one of those games that we all kind of saw. It was like, listen, they both were already through the group. You kind of got what you expected out of that. We'll see where they move forward from here. But ultimately, my three teams that I would really say I'm in a sense rooting for or watching for. I'm going to see what England does, what Spain does, and ultimately what Portugal does as well.
Great. So, Jake, you have any final questions for Baxter?
No, I mean, that pretty much answered it. I really wanted to know now that Germany was out. I mean, of course, going in, Vegas odds had Brazil and Germany both at 9-2. But who is the favorite? But yeah,
but even Brazil hasn't looked that great in this tournament either. So that's a concerning part about it for me as well too. I mean, realistically, Brazil was another one of those teams yesterday. Wednesday. If Serbia had won that game and beaten Brazil, it would have been Serbia and Switzerland in the second round. Brazil had not clinched anything. I mean, they're 7 points right now, and Serbia's only got 3, but. I mean, you think about that statistically. You had a game or a group yesterday that walked in the way it did. So Switzerland, they took care of they had a draw with Costa Rica, and then you had Serbia. Had they found a way to win, that could have been an entirely different thing. So I don't think people really grasp the concept how close Brazil and Argentina and some of these other big teams are or were to losing and being knocked out of the group. Germany just happened to be the one team that actually didn't do it and actually fell out of the group. Germany literally just needed a goal once during the 90 minutes outside of conceding goals, and they would have been through. However, that wasn't the case because Korea found a way to win. So it's interesting because people are just focusing on the fact that, great, Mexico's through, almost all of these really big teams were near minutes away or a shot off the crossbar or an unbelievable save away from being knocked out of the tournament. So I haven't found any true dominant performers yet outside of Croatia really in this tournament that have been like, yep, they deserve that. They deserve to go through. So it's interesting how the World Cup goes. I mean, even Iran, Spain was seconds away from getting knocked out of the tournament by Iran. Like, that would have been an amazing story if Iran had done that. But at the same time, Spain, who won the World Cup 2 World Cups ago, was literally, inches away from losing that game, I think 3 or 4 times.
Yeah, so we'll see what happens into the knockout phase, and obviously, Baxter, I'm sure we'll have you back on to talk more. But hey, you're welcome. Any, as you used to ask me, any closing remarks that we need to be looking forward to moving forward in the World Cup?
I think it's just been interesting to watch the fact of how the United States as a whole has responded. The biggest thing that I've seen, because folks have been talking about, well, what would the USA have done better than Panama in this World Cup? I think we all can kind of agree and say, yes, Panama scored 1 goal and conceded 9. I'd like to think the United States would have done a little bit better than that. But that also has to be a huge slap in the face of the U.S. men's national team saying, listen, you couldn't get it done. Now, in a sense, the team that really didn't deserve to go to the World Cup, that did go, got their butts handed to them on the international stage because we, as the U.S., couldn't get our act together for one more game. So I like to think the U.S. would have done far better. Would they have gotten out of the group if they'd have been drawn with England, Belgium, and Tunisia? Probably not. But either way, they would have still not conceded 9 goals and gotten 0 points. They would have at least fought and made this group look a little bit differently. So that's a hard thing to see when you see the guy that maybe cheated his way in to get the prize or get the job, and you see him not doing his job, and you're like, see, I could have done better. But you to yourself didn't step up and do what you had to do. So it was a little bummer to see Panama kind of just really get the floor wiped with them here in the tournament. But hopefully the United States can rebound in 4 years.
Yeah. Yeah, well, Baxter, where can we, obviously I'm sure our listeners are going to want to stay in touch with you and see what you have to say about the World Cup. As always, where can we follow you? Where can we get some insight of your World Cup knowledge?
Well, the easiest way to find me is either on Instagram or Twitter. My username is @Baxter Colburn, so feel free to find me that way. I do also help with the soccer podcast here on Public House Media called Your Soccer Passport, World Cup Edition. So we are getting out some new shows here once the group games are finishing up. So hopefully I'll have some guest appearances on those shows as well, too. I always enjoy when Yvonne and Luis and the other guys over there do the hosting, but I try to jump in because I've got all that soccer stuff I love to talk about. So you guys understand what that's like for hockey and all that other stuff. So,
Absolutely.
But yeah, I appreciate you guys having me on. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Thanks for joining us, and we will talk to you, I'm sure, very soon.
Perfect. Thanks, guys.
All right. Thank you. There goes Baxter Colburn. A special thank you to him for joining us this morning. When we come back, Jake and I will be talking with all this free agency buzz. We'll be talking about the worst free agency signings in sports. Stay with Jake and myself here in the Cheap Seats. Welcome back to the Cheap Seats. Matt Corn alongside Jake Holmes. As always, we are made possible by Public House Media. Be sure to visit them at thephmedia.com to find out more about other shows, about the Cheap Seats. Also, you can get yourself some swag for the Cheap Seats and the other shows. Jake, I'm actually looking right now at a Public House Media sticker that Baxter Colburn has been going around social media showing people, and I couldn't help myself. I had to get one too. So absolutely make sure you go on there to find out, find what you want: cups, shirts, hats, bags, whatever you want, whatever suits your fancy, if they still say that. So Jake, we're going to talk about free agency here. Just the worst deals of all time. The problem though, Jake, is there's not many. There haven't been many bad deals, so there's not much we can talk about. I'm completely joking. We could talk about this all day for the next week. But Jake, my number one when we were talking about this off air of who's the worst, and it's funny because people are gonna be like, "Why did you think of this?" But it was the first one because I think it's a little bit newer. But do you remember the good old Josh Hamilton? Jake, you remember Josh Hamilton with?
How can you forget Josh Hamilton? I mean, all the cool tattoos, and of course, the drug addiction as well. But yeah, how can you forget Josh Hamilton?
It's so obviously he gained his stardom with the Rangers. Went to the Angels for 5 years for $125 million for 5 years. 5 years, $125 million. He hit .255. He only had 32 home runs in 240 games. He hit. He was 0 for 13 in the playoffs, and he was part of a 98 win team. So, yes, his team was successful, but. It's just obviously he never really got it going. There's trades that there's signings that happen. I'm just like, that was a 1 year wonder kind of thing. I mean, don't get me wrong. Unfortunately, I know he relapsed, but his story I loved. I thought it was great how he came out of it. I was a huge fan of him. Maybe that's why it was the first one I thought of. But the ironic thing of it all, he still ended up back with the Rangers if I'm remembering right.
Yeah, he did. He came back. Yeah, the Josh Hamilton story was I mean, of course, he did relapse, but for what he had to overcome, and I'll tell you, somebody, from somebody that that's been affected by a loved one of somebody with addiction problems. Mm-hmm. I can't speak for them, but I can speak for how it affects those around you. It's so debilitating. I mean, it's so debilitating, and I mean, it happens to good people and people you wouldn't really expect. I mean, to not sound like stereotypical or anything, but what he did, how he came through, how he broke through. I believe it was 2004 or it was 2006. It was mid 2000.
Yeah, around there.
So how he was able to do that, I thought was very impressive. Mm-hmm. And I think that it's something that needs to be celebrated a little bit more, because I mean nobody really remembers him like they do so many others, Bobby Abreu or something like that.
Yeah. So it definitely, again, it was a great story. A shame with him going back into it. But so Jake, what's something that sticks out to you just offhand?
Well, I remember I was in sixth grade, I think. I mean, I was young, and I was watching television, and I saw Albert Hainsworth signs with the Redskins for 7 years, $100 million, $41 million of it guaranteed. He played, I think he played in like one game, and I mean the thing is he failed continuous physicals. And literally he tried to get cut. I mean, he literally at one point tried to get cut. So he was suspended for disciplinary reasons. He was acting out at practice and things like that. Mm-hmm. And this is all after, I think, 1 or 2 really good years with the Titans. So that Albert Hainsworth deal I always look at, and it's the one that I remember closely because I was watching ESPN. On a Wednesday night or something as a whippersnapper, and saw that. So I always think of Albert Hainsworth.
Yeah. Another one that hits home for you and myself is I remember kind of the same thing, watching the news and seeing the big 2010 Cleveland Browns sign Jake Delhomme, and I'm like, oh no! I was like, they might actually be good now, and. Well, we know how that ended, but that was another one that I just remember thinking, it's just what a terrible, terrible year he had. It was 2 years, and I mean, it wasn't a lot of money, but obviously he only played 5 games. He went 2-3, and then he was released the following offseason. So definitely that was just a wah for the Browns. I mean, the Browns, let's be honest, Jake, we could have a whole show just on the Browns. I mean, you got Jeff Garcia from 2004 when they signed him 4-year, $25 million. I mean, let's just do every quarterback from 2001 on. I feel like we would be okay talking about. But how does a team miss so many times on quarterback? I mean, the most important position on the field, and you fail that many times. Now, don't get me wrong. It's not all on Cleveland. We can't blame it all on them. But how do you fail that many times?
You know what? I think it's one of the most underrated mysteries in sports. Because I mean, we aren't talking about, a 5-year drought of just missing, of just missing on your free agents. This is every year since they've come back to the league. I mean, it's wild. I have no idea how you miss out that many times.
Yeah, it is just I mean, it is just. It really baffles me that I've talked, obviously with as much as I'm not fans of the Browns. I mean, after a while, you start to feel bad for them. It's just like, how do you possibly do that? I'm looking at a list here. I'm sorry, I'm getting off on a tangent here, but we have Ty Detmer, Doug Peterson, which that's interesting. You have Spurgeon Wynn, Kelly Holcomb, Jeff Garcia, Luke McCown, Charlie Fry, Trent Dilfer. And here's the thing, Derek Anderson, these weren't bad quarterbacks. Brady Quinn, they were Ken Dorsey, Bruce Gradkowski, Colt McCoy, Jake Delhomme, Seneca Wallace, Brandon Wheaton. These weren't like they were signing no-name quarterbacks. They were signing quarterbacks that has had success somewhere. And then they come to the black hole of Cleveland, and that's the end of it.
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting. It's really interesting with Cleveland. Like you said, I was just looking at old quarterbacks, and of course you see the old jersey too, that Cleveland quarterback jersey.
Yeah,
and
with the whole line of them.
Like
yeah.
20 of them. I mean, they had to make a new jersey.
Yeah,
a lot of those guys weren't bad quarterbacks. I mean, Seneca Wallace was a career backup.
Yes,
and I mean, they took a chance. But I mean, Jake Delhomme won a Super Bowl, or went to a Super Bowl.
Yeah,
and really was only a field goal away from beating the New England Patriots.
Well,
so I mean, yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah, and we need to be fair with Seneca Wallace, though, that in Madden 2012, I believe it was, he was not a backup quarterback, Jake. He was a starting quarterback, and he was unstoppable. I believe it was that year. So let's be fair to him, and remember that he had like a 95 speed, and he was like the Mike Vick of 2012.
Oh,
anyways,
gosh. Yeah, no kidding.
I got off topic again. I'm doing that a lot today. Anyway, so Jake, any other ones that really stick out to you from the 4 major sports?
Well, I mean, from an NBA standpoint, of course, with the free agent signing, coming up on Sunday. Sorry, I look at one, and I say this as a Chicago Bulls fan, is that the Bulls are involved in a lot of these. So,
yeah,
Ben Wallace back in 2006, I believe, when he was about 33 years old, they signed him to a 4-year contract and was giving him about $16 million a year. That didn't work. As well as, but it also goes on the other side. Luol Deng, when Luol Deng signed with the Lakers, Luol Deng was at the end of his career once he left the Derrick Rose-led Chicago Bulls. So that was one. That was another one. But finally, the one that I really want to say is that the New York Knicks just completely botched, and I'm talking recent too. The Knicks botching the Joakim Noah deal. They gave him like $100 million over 4 years or something ridiculous. I don't have the actual number in front of me. I was trying to find it, but something ridiculous. I mean, he played in like 10 games, and Joakim Noah was also at the end of his career. Plus, it was an injury-riddled career.
Yeah.
So that was that time. It's really this time. Just the norm of the New York Knicks.
Yeah. Another one I was thinking of when we were, obviously with NBA and NHL kind of in our view right now. Do you remember the Gilbert Arenas trade or the Gilbert Arenas signing?
Yes.
That's one that I will never forget because, well, first, it was 6 years, $111 million, Jake. And this guy, pretty much, I'm sure you remember, it was all over the news that he pulled a gun out on his teammate. And, again, this isn't the Washington Wizards' fault, but what a terrible signing. I mean, it's just this massive, massive signing, and that's how it ends. It just amazes me that these teams have to go through this, because like we said, you can't always blame the team. It's just, it's the person, it's the player that is to blame for. But it was still a terrible, terrible signing.
Yeah, and I mean, really, what's unfortunate about it being with the Wizards is that just 20, 30 years ago, it was about 35 years ago, I believe, that they changed their name from the Bullets to the Wizards because of gun violence.
Yes, yeah.
I mean, in the face of your organization is pulling out guns on people in the locker room. I mean, I don't understand that one either. And I mean, Gilbert Arenas, he was an okay player. I mean, he wasn't anything to write home about, I didn't think. I mean, he was the coolest part about Gilbert Arenas. There was two things. His last name's really cool, and his number was 0. He had a cool nickname, Agent Zero.
Yes.
That was about it. He wasn't a guy that you'd ever say was a top 10 player in the NBA. I have no idea. I just never saw the appeal with that, with him or that contract, obviously, because it turned out to be terrible. But.
Yeah. Sometimes you're just speechless. In baseball, I feel like there's a lot to talk about. I could talk about Pablo Sandoval. I could, the Panda. I could talk about Carl Crawford just with the Red Sox. But Jake, my last one I'm going to talk about. Then I'll let you talk what you want to talk about. But is one that hits very close home to you and myself. Not a Cleveland one. I'm going to go back mid-2000s, and people are going to wonder who's he talking about. Is Jason Bay. I remember.
Cry.
I remember being so sad. I'm like, here goes the Pirates again, getting rid of an MVP, blah, 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 and all of this. And I remember actually saying to a friend, well, I guess I was wrong about that one. Jason Bay to the Mets, 4 years, $66 million. And where is he now, Jake? Does anybody know?
I certainly don't.
Last I heard, he was in AAA. I don't know if that's still true. That was like 2 years ago.
Oh, my gosh. What's crazy is I have one of my first Pirate games that I ever went to, because it was a long time. I was alive for a long time before I went to a Pirate game. It was Jason Bay bobblehead night, and it was his 2004. It was his bobblehead night, and the bobblehead had 2004 National League Rookie of the Year. The Pirates got spanked by the Cubs, and it was great. But Jason Bay, I think, hit a couple dingers. He hit 2 home runs, I believe, in that game. I'll never forget it, and I'll never forget the night. And yeah, I love Jason Bay. I had his jersey when back then, and yeah, what happened to that guy? Jeez.
The crazy thing is that he played for Boston in 2009. He had a huge year. I didn't realize this, but he hit 36 home runs with Boston in 2009. So he left Pittsburgh. He still was but yeah, he went to the Mets and just fell off the face of the planet. I mean, he just was destroyed, and it was like one of those things. I was like, I hated to see because I liked him, but at the same time, I'm like, well, at least the Pirates actually for once got something right.
Yeah. But, how many teams has he been on now? I mean, I Pittsburgh, Mets.
He
Red
played
Sox and Mariners, I think. Right?
Yeah, that was it. Yeah, those are the ones he played for. 2013 was the last year. I don't know where he's been since then. So, but anyway, so any other ones that stick out to you? Something that you wanted to share?
Well, I got to finish it off with NHL, I guess. So
absolutely.
7 years, $36 million for David Clarkson back in 2013. It's been a contract that teams have been trying to purge it ever since. So, I mean, at the NHL draft, funny story, last year, the NHL draft, the Columbus Blue Jackets sent a second round. I believe it was a first round pick to Columbus to take William Karlsson and David Clarkson's contract. Those were the words, his contract. They were like, we don't know. We know you don't want the player. We just want you to take his contract because you're going to have the salary cap to be able to withstand it. So even whenever you think about how good the Vegas Golden Knights were this year, they were still responsible for like $4 or $5 million for David Clarkson, who hasn't been anything in the NHL since he played for the New Jersey Devils back when they went to the Stanley Cup in 2012. So yeah, I mean that's one that I always laugh at. That literally the Vegas Golden Knights were given it was a second round pick. Sorry, it was a second round pick for Vegas's best offensive player this year, but they also had to take David Clarkson, who didn't play a game in the NHL last year. It was just funny.
I'm sorry. As you were talking, it hit me. I cannot believe we forgot about this one, Jake. When I tell you this one, I'm so full of suspense this morning. I cannot believe that it hit me that July 1st is on Sunday. Jake, do you know what day is July 1st? In the MLB,
it's Canada Day. I know it's Canada Day, but in the MLB, I can't.
It is Bobby Bonilla Day.
Oh wow!
Do you know why?
Why? Tell me.
Okay, I can't. Oh, I'm so excited to tell you about this. Every year, I look forward to this. Bobby Bonilla every July 1st is paid by the Mets $1.19 million.
Oh, is that the first?
Yes. 2035, until 2035, part of Bobby Bonilla's contract is that he will get paid $1.19 million every July 1st until 2035. That may be the worst deal in the history of the MLB, and I could not believe I forgot about that.
Yeah. Oh, wow. I can't either. We should, especially us two, we shouldn't be forgetting about that one.
Well, it's funny. I don't even know what you said, something and it triggered. I'm like, wait, Bobby Bonilla gets paid. When is that happening? And it's like, we're there. Like, we should have been celebrating today. Well, not really, but yeah, who does that? Like, that sounds like one of those things. It's like, we're going to do this, but just to shut him up. I mean, wow. Anyways, what a bunch of terrible contracts. Jake, I'm glad, I'm glad I didn't have to pay you much to be part of my team. Next week I will be doubling your salary, so that should, I don't know how much that gives you, but that won't be a terrible signing because I love that you're my co-host. So,
oh, thanks, man. I love that you're that I'm with you too.
Don't tell Baxter though.
Oh, I won't.
Right, thank you. All right, so when Jake and I come back, we're going to give you our bold predictions for the weekend as well as the poll question, and we will see if we can be wrong again like we always are. So stay with Jake and myself here in the Cheap Seats. And welcome back to the Cheap Seats. Matt Coyne alongside Jake Holmes. And Jake, we're going to go into our favorite time of the show, which is our bold predictions, which I won't tell anybody what our standings are because they're pathetic, but that's why we put bold in front of it so we can't be pathetic and have an excuse. That should be the tagline of this segment. But I will start us off this morning, Jake. I'm going to stay in the World Cup as I did 2 weeks ago, and I am going to go out on a limb here, and I'm going to say that Belgium will still be in the World Cup when we come back together next week.
Oh, I like it. Belgium's the real deal.
Yep.
Belgium's the real deal. They really are. I know one of my buddies, he's, huge soccer fan, and he called it from the start. He said that Belgium will be in the Final Four.
Then that's not that bold then. Dang it.
Yeah, but it was also his surprise team.
Oh, okay.
So, it was his bold prediction as well.
It was his 12th seed.
Yeah, it was exactly. So yeah, Andrew might be spot on with that one. But I like the pick. I like the World Cup spot. But real quick, before I go into my bold prediction, I have to say this. I wouldn't be Jake Holmes if I didn't mention this. On June 28th, it was yesterday. Was the 20th anniversary of Mick Foley versus Undertaker, King of the Ring in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. It was the greatest professional wrestling match of all time. Mick Foley actually went to the WWF at the time, their creative team, and told them exactly what he wanted to do, because he wanted to give the people of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania that day the best show possible. He told them that he wanted the Undertaker to throw him 30 feet off the top of the steel cage.
I remember that. Crazy.
He wanted to be powerbombed onto a bunch of thumbtacks. He wanted to be powerbombed through the ring. That's what you're supposed to do as a professional athlete. Do everything you can to give the people that love you, the best show possible. So thank you, Mick. But anyways, my bold prediction is by this time next week, John Tavares will be a member of the Toronto Maple Leafs.
Oh,
yep. He'll join the Nazem Kadris of the world, the Austin Matthews, Mitch Marners. They're gonna be really good, and I think that might put the Maple Leafs over the top.
Yeah, that definitely would do it. So, well, you heard it here, both of our bold predictions. Also, be sure to go on our Facebook page to vote for today's show's poll question, which is what was a bigger surprise, Croatia just destroying in Group D, or Germany being eliminated before the knockout round. So make sure you go to Facebook, to the Cheap Seats page, like it, and then also be sure to answer our poll question. Again, Croatia, a bigger surprise, or Germany, a bigger surprise. Make sure you come back on Monday for the Cheap Seats, as always, with Christian and Jonathan, and then Wednesdays with Keith and Max, and then again next Friday with Jake and myself. Jake, as always, it has been a pleasure. I'm glad I'm back, glad we're back together, and looking forward to next week. Any closing remarks for us before we head out for the weekend?
All I got to say is, if you're a fan of the NBA and the NHL, this is one of the best times of year for you. This is going to be one of the best weeks. And buckle up, baby, because it's coming. It's coming. July 1st is Sunday, and that's Christmas for a lot of sports fans. So we'll see. It's going to be a lot of fun to watch next week.
Yes. Yeah, I agree. Excited to talk about it next week with you. And as always, Jake, it was a pleasure. Baxter Colburn, thank you for joining us. Always a pleasure having you on and talking about the World Cup. I'm sure we'll have you on again to get your insight in the coming weeks. For Matt Coyne and Jake Holmes, thank you for joining us here in the Cheap Seats, presented by Public House Media.